This podcast is part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, a program designed to help all podcasts reach their full potential. For information about joining the Robots Radio Rocket Club, check out robotsradio.net.
Hey all you heroes and champions, crows, pirates, and inquisitors. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast. I'm Shelby.
And I'm Austin.
And we are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe. From the Maker to Lyrium to Aravels, we will cover it all. There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad.
Hello and welcome to this special age of the Dragon Age Lorecast. I am Austin, also known as Teacup. I am one of your hosts for this podcast, and I'm here with my other co-host.
You almost said your other Shelby.
Yeah.
I'm Shelby. I'm one of the other co-hosts, and you might also know me as She-Cup.
Yeah, and so we have a special episode for today because today, not the day we're recording it, but the day that you as the listener are probably listening to this, today is our 1 year anniversary of the podcast.
Yay! I can't believe it's been a year.
I know. It's been a year. I was just going to say I did not expect the podcast to be where it's at in a year.
Oh yeah, same. I thought you were going to say I didn't expect to still be doing the podcast after a year, and I was like, what? Do you even know me? Because I did expect us to still be doing the show in a year.
Oh, I did too.
It's funny because I do feel like we've been doing this show longer than a year because we decided to do this podcast. We started talking oh, we should do a Dragon Age podcast. We should do a Dragon Age podcast in January of 2021 or February, February, end of January, I think beginning of February. And obviously we didn't actually start releasing episodes until August, end of August, but we decided to do the podcast in April, beginning of April of 2021. And it took us from April to August to actually get episodes out and our intro and all that kind of stuff done. So it took us a while to get episodes out. So I feel like we've been honestly doing it longer than just 1 year.
Yeah. And I guess part of that was that I was a little bit too much of a perfectionist and had to accept that it's better to get content out than it to be in whatever standard I was holding it to.
That's right. That's okay. We got it out.
That would be my advice to anyone who's looking to start a podcast is just get your content out there.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So we have a few things we were going to talk about. So do you want to jump into those, Austin?
Yeah, I think we can just go ahead and do that. And so we're going to just talk about some questions that reflect upon our time as this podcast. And so the first one is my favorite question, which is, what is the funniest memory from our year in this podcast for you?
Why don't you go first?
All right. So for me, I have two funniest memories. I think there's one that's a blooper, or if I can remember, but we said something and you make some noise that's just blah or something like that. And we listened to that over and over again for 20 minutes, just cackling at you going blah.
It was so funny.
I think we think that's funny, but my second favorite one actually happened in one of our patron chats, which, if you know, we had Genesis from the Two Girls Ship, One Ship podcast on several times, and she is one of our patrons, and she was on a patron chat talking about our favorite romance. And Genesis and I have very different decision-making choices in these games, meaning that I have a tendency to kill her favorite characters.
A tendency, okay.
Yeah, and so first of all, to defend myself, one, I didn't know Zevran was a companion the first time I played DAO, so I just killed him because I was like, I don't want an assassin.
Okay, Austin, we have gone over this 1,000 times. I don't think you need to reiterate.
So we were talking about that, and the topic of Anders gets brought up, and as everyone knows, I am not the biggest fan of Anders. And I talked about, as I've told on this podcast, how I rage killed Anders. And Jen just goes, and she had not finished Trespasser at this point. And she goes, first you did Zev, and now you've done Anders. Next, you're going to tell me that you killed Bull too. And I will tell you that I did not do Bull's side quest to save the Chargers in Inquisition the first time. So I did have to kill him. But we couldn't tell Jen that. And you just look at all the patrons, and it is just silence as everyone just stares in horror as no one wants to break it to her that what happens to Bull.
I was literally covering my face. I'm pretty sure I was beet red.
Yeah, I just remember standing there, we're just kind of like, why I like, oh my gosh, I have killed all of Jen's romancing companions. Well, I haven't killed them. My player characters have killed them. So those are my two funniest moments.
I think my funniest moment is kind of like an amalgam of a bunch of different moments, because this has just kind of become a huge joke in our Discord server now. Like, there's a certain character that we discuss very frequently on the show because he's a very important character. And pretty much every time we bring him up in the show, I groan or go, ugh, or something like that. And it's Lord Seeker Lambert. And so the joke is in the Discord server, like, oh, Shelby's favorite character. Like, you always find a way to bring him into the conversation. And so now every time I think about him or bring him up or he ties into the lore somehow, I'm like already chuckling because I know the Discord server is going to roast me.
Which they are. And there's been a lot of funny things from the Discord, which you should join if you haven't. But we'll talk about that later, of just funny things that happen. Most recently, discovering that there are sort of soulless clones all around Dragon Age 2.
Yeah, and the NSFW photos of Iron Bull.
Oh, yeah. It's been a lot of fun. All right, do you have any other funny moments you want to share?
I mean, I have a lot of funny moments, but those are the ones that stick out to me.
Yes. The next question is, what has been your favorite topic or episode?
My favorite episode that we've done was definitely the one where we got to interview E.K. Johnston from Star Wars fame. That was really awesome interview. Loved her, loved nerding out about Dragon Age with her. Just an excellent, excellent episode, and honor to be able to interview her as well too.
Yeah,
Hope I didn't steal yours.
You didn't. That's definitely up there with one of my favorite episodes, and just being a Star Wars fan was a big fan moment for me.
No way. Don't you have like another Star Wars podcast or something?
Sure. Yes, I do have another Star Wars podcast. And so I think my favorite topic that we have discussed, I really enjoyed our Dorian episode. I thought that one was good. And I really, really, really enjoyed almost all of our Dwarven episodes. I think those are some of the most interesting episodes with a lot of interesting fan theories attached to it.
Very true.
Yeah. Though if you're caught up on the podcast, and we get into some big fan theories in some of these newer episodes too, with the demons.
Oh yeah. I was like, we do.
Yeah. So yeah, I think those are my favorite. Our next question, and this is a big one, I think, is that what is something that you learned from this podcast that you later went back and experienced in the games? And I'll go first. So the first one for me is the entire Forbidden Ones, all the stuff to do with them. I mean, I fought Imshale in Dragon Age Inquisition when I first played it, but I had no idea who he was or anything about it. And so I fought Gax King for the first time just a couple weeks ago.
I don't even think it was that long ago.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was a couple days ago. And so I didn't even know that he was a thing in Origins, and there's so much I haven't experienced in Origins, but that one comes up. And what comes up recently, I haven't, going back in Dragon Age 2 and learning about Gamla's daughter. I learned about her in one of the podcast episodes, and I had never experienced that, which I was under the impression that I had experienced everything in 2.
You were wrong.
Yeah.
That's funny that you say that, because I was under the impression that I had experienced everything in Origins. And my answer to this question is about Origins. So when we were doing, I can't remember if this came up in our Solus episode or in our Elven Gods episode, but somewhere in there, I learned that when Dalish clans do have statues of Fen'Harel, they always point those statues away from their campsite, as kind of like a ward or protecting their camp, and they don't want him to face themselves because like they think he's the god of trickery and rebellion, and so they want that rebellion to go outward instead of inward. And so I went back and looked in the Brazilian Forest, in Dragon Age Origins, and all of the Fen'Harel statues, and there are a few. They're all facing outward, outside of the campsite, and that's just a tiny touch that, they didn't have to do that, but they did.
Right. Yeah. And I think this one might be a little longer of a question, but we'll see. What is a topic you'd like to revisit?
Yeah. So there are 2 things that I want to revisit, and I want to revisit them in more detail than we did them in the first. So also, side note, if you're listening to this episode and if there are things you want us to revisit, definitely DM us, or put it in the Discord server, because I would like to know what you guys want to. But the 2 things that pop up for me when I'm thinking about this question are, number 1, I want to visit the old gods, in like each give them their own episode so that we can get super deep into the lore instead of just giving a broad overview. And then second, I would like to revisit the Elven gods, especially the Evanuris, and potentially give them their own episode as well, so that, again, we can go further into detail.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely stole one of mine, which is the Elven gods. Getting the Elven gods in there, I think would be really great. And just getting into more detail. And we know so many more people who have done work, and getting them to guest on the episode and share some of their knowledge with us too. But I think if I had to add to what you said, I think that I would want to revisit the blights, maybe. And because I remember we talked about the 2nd and 4th blight almost like every episode for our first like 10 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
But I want to go back and like really just kind of touch on each blight. And I know that there's some that we don't really know a lot about. Like we don't know a lot about the 3rd blight, but I would like to revisit those.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And just kind of like more dive into, and a little spoiler for what's coming up, we will eventually talk about like the conflicts of Thedas, like the War of the Lions, the Orlesian and like the Ferelden Rebellion, like King Merrick's Rebellion, and all of that going on.
I'm really excited for that series too.
Yeah. But yeah, those are all the kind of like reflection questions that I wanted to revisit. Is there anything else about the podcast that you want to say before we jump over to thanking our patrons and maybe reading a review or 2?
No, I mean, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has supported us, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Just a little like kind of story so you all can see kind of where we are is a year ago today, as you're listening to the podcast, we received 3 downloads.
Our very first day.
Yeah, our very first day, we received
so funny
3 downloads. Today or yesterday, one of them, we crossed 41,000
forever. Yeah.
And so that's amazing to me. I just love the support that you all have given us.
3. That's hilarious.
I know. I looked it up and it was I laughed a little bit about it. But yeah, so let's go into like kind of like reading a review. I think we have a review to read, and then we'll go into thanking our patrons.
Why don't you read the review and I'll thank the patrons?
Yes. So this review it came in via email because they rated us on Spotify. And so thank you for that. And here is a review. And so if you don't have an Apple account and want to rate us on Spotify and write some words, we will read it out on a show. That's another way you can do that. This says, "Hi, I'm Nathaniel, not Hal Lewis. I listen to the podcast on Spotify, so I can't leave a worded review. I think this podcast is great, and the lore is always good to know. And my favorite part is the theories that Austin makes. Also, I didn't rage kill Anders, but I did rage exile him, though. Solid decisions. I enjoy my theories too, so it's good to know that someone else does too."
No comment.
Yes, but thank you for the review, and we are so glad that you enjoy the podcast.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. And so now Shelby is going to read the list of every patron that we've ever had.
Yeah, for all eternity. So some of these people aren't patrons anymore, and that's okay. Patrons ebb and flow, and so we just wanted to say thank you to anyone who's ever financially supported us. I think this is like the biggest honor ever, that people would pay money, give money to us, to thank us for the content we create. So all of the patrons are Lisa M, Genesis, Derek B, Fletcher M, Zuba, Jazza, Kokashins, Christopher L, Becky M, Psych 88, Rain, Crystal J, Nicholas B, and our newest patron, Wesbotron. Yeah, thank you all so much. So thankful for you.
Yes, thank you. We really appreciate your support. And if listening to this, you feel you want to go and join us on the podcast and become a patron, you can follow that link in the episode description. You can also find our Discord server in the episode description there, and you can come and hang out with us for all of that. And that's a great way to connect. Last, I just want to say thank you for everyone who supports us in all ways. This has been an amazing journey, and one of my favorite parts of the past year has been doing this podcast.
I agree. And I also have a couple more thank yous. I wanted to say thank you to Tom for Robots, who always gives the best advice. If you're thinking about starting a podcast, you should definitely go join the Robots Radio Rocket Club. Also, thank you to the Rocket Club, who, that mentorship and support of that group has been invaluable to helping our podcast get off the ground. Also, thank you to all of our patrons. We just thanked y'all, but thank you again. Also, thank you to all the Robots Radio, like your full hosts who shout us out and retweet our tweets and help us like on social media. Amazing. Thank you. All of the admins in our Discord server. Thank you to Ben of Temeria, Genesis, and Kolkashins. They're all admins in the Discord server. We're super thankful for them and the work they put in over there. Also, thank you to N7 the Legend, who always shouts us out on his streams of Dragon Age Origins. And lastly, thank you to everyone who's ever listened to any of our show. We are so thankful for you. And if it wasn't for you, we would just be putting out this content into the abyss. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. And here is to another year.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. As always, you can find us on Twitter at DA Lorecast. If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, email them to us at dalorecast@gmail.com. The Dragon Age Lorecast is a part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club. You can join the Robots Radio Network Discord by clicking the link in our episode description. If you enjoyed our show, we'd love it if you'd subscribe and give us a review. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Ariel.
And we're the hosts of the Legend of Zelda Lorecast, podcast about all things Legend of Zelda, from Errol to Zora.
And all the fun things in between.
If you're ready to dive deep and learn more about the Legend of Zelda lore and everything surrounding it, come join us on the Legend of Zelda Lorecast. You can find us on Apple iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
We hope to see you soon.